So we're sitting here in Bogota at the bar, and we were just discussing sex addiction, or not sex addiction actually. We were discussing what would it be like if you came to live in a place where it's actually very, very easy to date, and there were loads of opportunities, and you could probably quite quickly get into a cycle of that almost taking over your life. Because we were saying, well, what if you came and lived in somewhere like, where we are now? You could work, you could date and everything, but because dating here is relatively, it's quite free and easy here, there's a lot of opportunities. Would that then start to become an obsession and kind of take over your life? And can that actually be a problem for people?
Well, my entire life really is just a dopamine rush. That's the problem.
Yeah.
I live a very unstable life because it's either drink, drugs, or chasing birds. So it's incredibly fun, but it's incredibly weirdly stressful life to lead, isn't it? And you can argue, the kind of the higher power spiritual path is actually kind of renounce all that garbage, isn't it? And you would, the purist would argue, actually, your baseline happiness will be more consistent because you're not actually spiking it with dopamine so much. Yeah,
but I mean, I thought what you were going to say then was my whole career is based on sex addiction, which it probably kind of is. And I mean, mine, if you could dignify with the term career, mine certainly is as well, or it certainly was at the beginning, because the reason that I got into this was stuff.
This was personal kind of. It was a personal lifestyle choice that we then decided actually by figuring out we actually really enjoy helping people. We love traveling, living on our own terms. That this is a viable business as well.
Yeah, but I mean, there's the old question, the old chestnut of whether sex addiction really exists, and I think there's a lot of grey areas with something like that. I don't know if what your thoughts are. Give us let us know in a minute. But I mean, I think there's definitely times you can become very compulsive around it, for sure. And there's definitely times in my life where I've been very led by that to the exclusion of other things. Pretty much all of my 20s, really, I would say.
Not just sex. I mean, for me, if I'm not careful and I'm really just not living consciously, if I'm not out getting laid, I'll be masturbating, 3-4 times a day, normally. I mean, I've got extremely high sex drive. So what I've been experimenting with recently, and this is a bit of a tangent, isn't it, this video, but whatever, is actually not kind of no fat, but not in a kind of quasi-religious way, just channeling that energy you get from sex or wanting to have sex into other things.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you figure you find out actually you have a lot of energy to kind of do other things if you're not kind of expending it on sex or some format of that, some variation of that. So that's an interesting thing. But in terms of,
is sex addiction real?
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, as you say, it's about compulsivity.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's like chasing any high. I mean, the great irony is, and we always joke about this, but we're paid to essentially come to places like Colombia, Brazil, where we're getting paid to get guys to make noises at the barbarian offspring of the Spanish conquistadors, and it's just quite. I mean, the whole thing when you existentialize it is just hilarious, but. On a base level, you could argue all of what we're doing is essentially pointless unless a guy's actually looking for a wife and wants to start a family. It's all nonsense, isn't it? Because you're chasing around, you get the dopamine hit, you're spunking your load into a condom, and it's forgotten about. You could argue the whole thing is ridiculous. That's not going to put us out of business because sex is obviously a fundamental driver, and the fact is the human brain, evolving over hundreds of thousands of years, hasn't caught up to the modern invention of contraception, which has been around for 100 years. Yeah. So we're still driven by the same impulses.
Yeah, we are. But so I mean, what you're saying, it's a whole rigmarole. You're on the hamster wheel, aren't you? Of
you're
nonsense.
You are on a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Format. We always say about unplugged from society, and I'm not saying we're going to go all holy in the now and stop interacting with women and
well, for the Rouge V moment's coming up.
But there is an argument to say, isn't there, that it's all nonsense.
No, it is all nonsense. But come and join us in Poland, and the details for the boot camp below. No, it is all nonsense in the wider sense. Yes, because what are you really chasing? Unless you're going to, as you say, get married, or not even get married, you're going to have kids, and sort of make it a more serious thing. I mean, it's all gratification, really. Very, pleasurable gratification in the moment, but then you're left. We talked a lot about the dark nights of the soul that you can get afterwards, after you've slept with somebody and you're laying there thinking, oh, what's the, it's the same old thing again.
Then again, the idea of there is no such thing as legacy. We have a certain amount of conscious vision and breath, and then it's lights out, it's sayonara. So why not fill your time with loads of hedonistic shit? I mean, it doesn't really matter. If it makes you happy, I think that's the key point.
Well, if we are of the belief that there is no afterlife, that life is essentially fairly random and kind of pointless in the sense that we're all sort of here by accident, essentially. You know, we're on this bit of rock that's floating around in space, and it's all a bit random, and the planet's going to be burnt to a crisp at some point anyway, and everything's going to be forgotten about. Then
it's actually, I mean, it sounds horrendous, but it's unfortunately true.
Yeah,
it's a nightmare you can't wake up from.
Exactly, it is. So if we accept that as the baseline reality, and look, I mean, it sounds very nihilistic, and it is, but at the same time, you can still have a great laugh while you're, you know, with that in mind.
I think that should be the main premise of your life. We did a few videos yesterday about playfulness and having fun. Really, I think that should be what you lean into the most, because why not spend your time generally sitting in good emotion?
Well, but yeah, the thing I was going to say was, if you accept that as your baseline, and I appreciate that not everyone watching this will, because there's probably some people who are going to say, well, no, you know, there's an afterlife and etc., etc. But if you're coming in from a fairly atheist position on this, I like to hedge my bets with everything, man. But if you're coming at it from a fairly sort of agnostic to atheist position, then why not just indulge your, you know, the greatest pleasures? Why not become Hugh Hefner, really? I mean, you know, people say, oh, it's this sad old guy in a dressing gown surrounded by models, but what better way to go, really? You know, because ultimately, if he's just going to die and there's nothing after that, why not spend, you know, your final moments surrounded by some beautiful women and just having a great time?
And everything is sex, right? Everything is sex. So you could say he's won on the basis that he's got, you know, a stable of fine young fillies around him, you know, satiating his every sexual desire, which is the fundamental driver of the entire life, you know, how it operates. So you could argue porn stars and people like Hugh Hefner are actually the winners.
So we're kind of saying two things at the same time in a way, aren't we? Because on the one hand, we're saying sex can be addictive, and in chasing that fulfillment, it's an empty thing because it's sort of superficial and it's not really going to make you happy. But then at the same time, we're also saying that actually, on another level, sex is the most important thing on the planet because our hindbrains haven't caught up with the fact that we're not reproducing. But I suppose fundamentally, what we're saying is pleasure is if you think that. If you accept the fact that ultimately there isn't any great purpose to life, you might as well chase pleasure, because why the hell not? Why be a martyr?
Yeah, I remember a conversation I had with Apex Nutsack about the edge, co-promoting the edge, and he said, actually, I can't remember the exact things, I'm paraphrasing, but he said a rejection, a man being rejected by the opposite sex on a fundamental, you know, sexual level, or his inability to reproduce, basically he's an incel. Yeah. That's mentally one of those damaging things that can ever happen to you, because on an evolutionary level, that's basically saying, right, I can't cash my chips forward, I'm screwed. So I think this whole concept of kind of this MGTOW thing of guys going, well, you know, actually, you know what, I'm just going to bypass the whole chase women thing because it is pointless and blah, blah, blah. It's like on an existential level, you're going to feel deeply unsatisfied with the entirety of your life. So if you're happy to have that terrible background programming, you know, that dread running throughout the entirety of your existence, fine. But most people aren't going to want that. So you've got to alleviate that by leveling up, by making yourself better, by climbing the sexual market place, you know, up to the pinnacle, or as far as you can go. Because otherwise, on an existential level, that dread is going to sit with you out through the entirety of your consciousness.
But equally, even if you're, you know, enjoying the fruits of the sexual marketplace to its fullest extent, that is still not going to make you happy. But I mean, it's weird, isn't it? You're going to have a great time for parts of it, but it's also on a very fundamental level, it's not going to make you happy. So what are we really saying? I suppose it doesn't matter, because you're just going to die anyway at the end. So
if you want to live I guess most guys want to look back, if possible, and say, well, I gave it the best go, I gave it a shot. Life is just an experiment. Anyway, I did everything I could. Which is why we should always, as men, lead into discomfort, because the ultimate fate is awaiting you, and it's far more uncomfortable than anything you could possibly choose to lean into. I think you should do it twofold. I think you should look to fill your time with stuff that makes you happy in life, but I also think you shouldn't ignore dating, and you should invest in yourself and your ability to go and date the opposite sex, because look, we all know that hanging out with guys is a lot of fun. You know, hanging out with a bunch of girls for endless hours, you know, is not the most fun thing to do necessarily, but you have this closeness, this rawness, this kind of almost micro big bang when you have this sexual connection with a girl that you cannot replicate in any other experience you ever have in life. Maybe with VR in 10, 20 years you can, but you know, we're not there yet. We're going to be long gone by then. So on a human level, the flesh on flesh, the real deep connection you have with a woman, that crazy presence. You know, you cannot replicate that elsewhere. You have to go through the rigmarole of getting there with women. There's a fuckload of pain, fuckload of rejection, but those small wins, those glitter of wins you get, are always worth it. TT, may he rest in peace. I mean, his set was something like 380 women, and he said he did that from 10,000 approaches. That means 9,600 and something were failure, right? That's crazy, but we're playing a game of losses to get the small wins, and that's symptomatic of not just dating as a man, of life.
Absolutely, yeah. Cheers. I think, like we were saying yesterday, I think really, let's be completely honest, really, all of the answers aren't in chasing girls or chasing money or chasing possessions or any of this nonsense. Really, the answers are spiritual. Really what we should be saying is just, guys, turn off this channel, go away, meditate, go to the Himalayas, sit on a mountain, you know, because that if there are answers to be found in this world, I believe that they are to be found in the spiritual. However,
that's because you've gone through the process of being a gender and having loads of sex.
But however, most of us are actually, you know, what's the phrase? The flesh is. It's almost like the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Actually, it's the other way around. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. So spiritually, in your soul, you might be like, yeah, I want meaning, I want something more. But the reality is, we're all human beings. We're all a bit weak, not weak, but we're just like, you know, we enjoy pleasure, we enjoy comfort. We want sex, we want that feeling of connection. And you've got to accept the reality of how you're engineered, haven't you? You can't just say, oh, I'm just going to sit on a mountain and bypass everything.
Well, this is the fascinating point, and the guy that I resonate with a lot of his content at the moment, I know Fleur Social knows him, Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom podcast. He's big into the evolutionary psychology stuff, and the point he made is very interesting, which because we understand this stuff, and if you agree, the kind of the Richard Dawkins and the Dave Buss of the world have, you know, a degree of influence, and that their information is generally on point. Basically, now we're clever enough. Actually, a great summing up of this is a title of another evolutionary psychology book called "The Ape That Understood the Universe." But essentially, understand our own fundamental drivers and programming with using evolutionary biology principles, and so you can kind of override it, can't you? You can be like, well, I know I feel horny, I know that, you know, my programming wants me to do that, but actually I'm going to do this. So you can start to consciously move in other ways.
You can.
And it's just whether you kind of let yourself succumb to the monkey brain in the moment, or you're taking that more backseat, higher level kind of view. And I think like most of the answers, we're going to do the old smoke and mirrors. That the answer is to be found somewhere in the middle, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating how you've got somebody like Rouge, and you know, has been the butt of some humour, really, maybe unfairly, you know, over the last couple of years, because he's turned to quite hardcore Orthodox Christianity. I'm not sure. Yeah, as far as I know, I mean, he's completely disavowed all of the old dating stuff that he used to do. I mean, for people who don't know, he was a blogger and a writer who used to spend a lot of time in Eastern Europe, and actually, I think, Colombia as well, and different places, and, you know, met lots of different girls and had a great time, and then he disavowed all of that stuff and became a devout Orthodox Christian, and people are sort of like, well, is it genuine? What a massive pivot, etc., etc. But you can kind of see, for me, it's a very extreme move. I think that you know, for me, I think the path has got to be more nuanced than that. But you can kind of see why he did it, because ultimately, I think, and a lot of these characters, you know, a lot of people that we're following in their footsteps, have come to a bit of a sticky end with this stuff, haven't they? And I think it's because there is a certain hollowness, unfortunately, in if all you're doing is chasing sex. We said this many times before. If all you're doing is chasing the sexual experience, that is quite hollow, isn't it? There's got to be something. There to be something more.
I mean, I think, and that's the problem with a lot of guys that get into this. They do it, and I've been guilty of this in the past. Yeah. Going on dates back in the day, you know, when I used to line up loads on a Sunday, and you'd have girls going, so, you know, what do you actually do for fun? And wouldn't have nothing to say other than I'm running around Oxford Street chasing girls, which obviously is not something you can say. Well, I think I said it as a joke, and she laughed, and I was like, oh, thank God she doesn't actually know. But that's yeah.
Probably worth a shout out to a film that we've both now seen, which is Shame with Michael Sheen, which is a great movie, isn't it? What did you think of that when you saw it?
It is, but there was a lot of resonation actually. Yeah. Quite horrendous shadow side resemblance going on there, you know, from my own kind of like experience of stuff previously. So it was quite harrowing to watch actually.
Yeah, it's quite. You guys should check it out. Shame with Steve. What's it called? Michael Sheen is the. Sorry, Michael Fassbender. Yes. Yeah, you guys should check out the movie. It's really, really good. Quite dark, quite harrowing, but it explores sexual addiction. This guy who kind of descends into the depths through his compulsion around sex. And I mean, yeah, I resonated with it as well. I mean, the thing that I can say for myself is I think that that compulsion, I think, in me has lessened a bit. And I think that's maybe just partly to do with age. You know, like you start to just give less of a monkeys, and, you know, it's quite nice just to spend an evening in drinking a cup of chamomile tea. So thankfully the monkey's slightly off my back, not totally, but it is a bit. Right. But for guys who are, particularly younger guys who are in it, and the testosterone is like coursing through your veins, it's very hard not to get completely sucked into this stuff, isn't it? Or even worse, you're on the other side and you feel you're like an incel, or you feel that you believe that you're an incel and you can't get sexual access. Then that's a terrible, terrible place to be, isn't it?
That's the worst, isn't it?
And we joke about, you know, we have banter about the black pill and everything, but I mean, for guys who are actually in that position, or believe they're in that position, that's a terrible place to be.
When you know it's game on with some women, and maybe they're not quite up to scratch or whatever, but you just have some sort of option, which, to be honest, most guys, if they actually go out and apply themselves, you know, they do some approaching, you know, they dress well, they should be able to get some option.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you're in that boat of you really can't pull a muscle, I mean, that's extremely depressing place to be. And I mean, periods of my life, you know, obviously not understanding this stuff way back when, that was me. I mean, I wasn't pulling a muscle, you know, and I didn't really know what was up, and it's a very depressing place to be.
Yeah.
But that's why this black pill narrative is so damaging, isn't it? Because it basically, someone who may be struggling a bit with the process, it tells them the mantra is, right, give up entirely.
Yeah. Which is not necessary, I believe, for the majority of guys. I believe that the majority of guys actually who watch something like, even say, Wheat Waffles channel, I reckon the majority of those guys actually are probably just average-looking guys. I don't think that there's this huge community of guys who are so aesthetically challenged that they're not going to be able to get to have any dating experiences. I think that a lot of it is just not applying oneself, and because it's very easy to fall into that narrative. You know, you go out, you do a few approaches, you get blown out a few times, and then you think, oh, sorry, we'll sod that. And then you find this narrative online, and it's very easy to sink into that. But I mean, bringing all of this stuff together, I mean, and we've said this before, and I mean, the black pill, the doomer guys will just reject it out of hand. But I mean, the thing that they want, the sexual access that they want, ironically, if they did get it, that still wouldn't make them happy. But of course, it's very tough to say that to somebody when it's like saying to somebody who's got no water in the desert, you know, oh, water's overrated anyway. So basically, what's the message of the video? Nothing's going to make you happy, and we're all going to die.
Uno mas. See.
Join us in Poland.
Join us in Colombia. I mean, I could see us setting up a residency here, like a DJ in like a DJ in Vegas setting up a residency.
We'll do Project Columbia.
Yes, yeah.
Project Columbia.
That's a good idea. And actually, there's another video I want to touch on, which is watch the next video where we're going to go into what Troy said, touched on about you get blown out a few times and give up. We're going to touch on that and how basically one of the biggest lies I was ever sold when I was watching this content growing up and deciding when to go into this was this three secrets to get any girl, and we'll delve into why that mindset is completely bullshit and why you need to basically embrace the dark side, embrace rejection, use that as your friend, and how to kind of leverage that into your own dating life. See you in the next one.